or HOTS. So get you thinking, okay, about TN50. And if you can remember the slapping incident, you know that the government is very serious about getting attention to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Fauzy. Okay, I think Prof. Walker, I feel that you have some comments or some response to this because I heard you say something yourself. Would you like to?
I'll just make a brief comment. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. I'm very excited to be here representing Monash University, and one of the things I hope to be working on over the coming years is very much linking Monash as both an Australian and a Malaysian institution into the discussion that's going on within ASEAN about higher education and about education more generally. So I think that Australian input we can really learn a lot from you, and perhaps you can learn something from Australian institutions about the approach we're taking. I'll just make a brief comment. Obviously 2050 is a long way away. It's more than 30 years away, and if we think back 30 years ago, it gives us some idea of just how much things have changed. And I'd second one of the comments we just heard, that in many respects we simply don't know what our economy in particular is going to look like in 30 years. We don't know what sort of jobs our students will be graduating to go into. So there's a lot of uncertainty, there's going to be a lot of disruption, a lot of creative disruption, and I think we need to work as educators to prepare ourselves and to prepare our students for uncertainty. And I think in some way that will move us away from an education approach that is strongly based on content and knowledge to an education approach that has a much better balance between content and knowledge and skills. Particularly skills about creativity, adaptability, entrepreneurship, more generic skills like that to prepare students for that uncertain environment. And I think while we're doing that, I think in a sense we've got to try to be doing two things at once as educators. First of all, of course, we have to meet some of the regulatory requirements that our speaker just talked about. Governments here, governments for me back home in Australia, are rightly concerned about the quality and standards of the education we provide to students. So we have to take those regulatory requirements very seriously, and we have to meet them. At the same time, we have to operate in a way where regulation doesn't pose a barrier to creativity. So we have to find a way that at the same time we can be creative. And to me, perhaps a lesson for education lies in what happened to the taxi industry. And I'm thinking about Uber, I'm thinking about Grab. Once upon a time we had companies, universities, taxi companies that had pretty much a monopoly on providing a particular type of service. Now we've got individuals saying, well, I've got something I can offer, and by using modern technology, I can match what I have to offer with someone who might need it or want it. Now we all understand how that works for Uber. Probably a number of you came here this morning using Uber. What would that mean for education? If we had people or institutions or parts of institutions who said, look, I've got something to offer in educational terms. And then we had students out there thinking, oh, it's not just my own university that can potentially teach me, it's this whole network of people, of institutions, of organisations with knowledge. I'm going to dial up to them and get my Uber education or part of it, or a micro credential, a little part of my degree, from someone perhaps on the other side of the world. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen, I'm not advocating for it, but we don't want to find ourselves like the old taxi companies who are completely taken by surprise by the use of new technology to deliver services to people in new ways. I think we're going to experience disruption as higher educators, as high school educators, as pre-U educators. We need to be ready for it. Thank you very much.
I failed to mention that Prof. Walker is not new to Southeast Asia. You've been a specialist and speak Thai. And Toy, you will be glad, yes, specialist in the region and loved working with Thai issues. Yeah. All right, so maybe you should get together later. All right, so Prof. Walker actually has a perspective of the Southeast Asian community, society as well. And you mentioned about Uber and Grab. Do you know that there's Riding Pink?
Riding Pink?
Yeah, I think it's Riding Pink, yeah? And Dr.
I don't know, but I can guess what it is.
Okay, so Dr. To took one yesterday. I mean, we arranged for this conference some participants to come on Riding Pink. You know what it is? How many of you have heard of Riding Pink? No, none? Okay, thanks to Cash, she found Riding Pink. And every one of our participants, our speakers who came on Riding Pink, were so satisfied with it. What is it? It's a group of ladies offering something like Grab and Uber, but they're so small that they don't even have an app yet. But we were so good with communicating. There's an extra effort communicating, but the experience was worth it. The outcome was so good that they want to use Riding Pink again back to KLIA. All right, so that's how good it is. So again, it's meeting needs that, being entrepreneurial, that some people think of, that's necessary, and when it's done, it's good. All right, so back to, I'd like to invite Prof. Paulina next. Prof. Paulina is actually a very, very humble person. She's actually advisor to the Minister of Higher Education in Indonesia. And with that, I'd like to ask Ibu Paulina to respond to what Professor Fauzy or Prof. Andrew Walker has given. Just remember, Indonesia is a country with many islands. If the Philippines has 7,000 plus islands, Indonesia has 17,000 plus islands, with about 260 million people, with about 500 dialects or languages. It's a diverse country, but they go on the premise of harmony through diversity. Yeah? Harmony through diversity. That's their motto. So with that, may I welcome Ibu Paulina to say a few words. Yes, please. I think you got some slides, is it?
Yes, thank you, Ibu Zoraini. Good morning to everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I think I would like to stand there so that I can. I can see my slide from my.
Oh yeah, okay, Bu.
From my phone. Okay, so Cass will help me to move forward. Okay. All right. Listening to what Prof. Fauzy and Prof. Walker were talking about this morning, it's kind of scary, but for me, but also optimistic, because we are in the same boat. I believe we are walking toward the future. Indonesia has also been involved in many transformation effort. To the teachers, to the higher education, to the schooling system, etc. But I think the latest one is not as big as the TN50 for Malaysia, but we are moving that way, and I feel that perhaps I can share what are the challenges for us in Indonesia instead of the big picture of the TN50 like you have already explained. Okay. Here's the data about Indonesia in brief, in one slide only. About the population is 255 million right now, and the higher education, we have faculty members only 837 person lecturer, and only 10% PhDs. So you can imagine that, okay? So if Prof. Fauzy was telling that TN50 is so big, this is more bigger. Okay, in terms of number. Okay, and then we have students right now about 5 to 6 million. And with that number, actually the gross enrollment rate is only 31%. We are expecting to increase 50% at least 2030, not yet 2050. 2050 we have higher number, but at least in 2030 we are moving toward 50%. So we have only 3 universities in the world ranking, the QS world ranking, that is Universitas Indonesia, some of you may have known, and then ITB, Institute of Technology in Bandung, and Gajah Mada University in Yogyakarta. And the most stunning number perhaps that we have almost 4,500 higher education institutions in Indonesia, with 25,000 study programs. So it is a big, huge number that we have to take care. When we were talking about the story just now, Prof. Walker mentioned about 30 years ago, how was the teaching was happening, etc. I was just thinking, because I was doing the research recently, that the 30 years of teaching and learning in higher education, 30 years ago and 30 years now, after 30 years, almost actually the same. Although the outside world has already been changing into disruptive and, creative situation, but the inside in the inside classroom is just almost the same. So I urge you, each one of you, please go back to your place, universities or academy or a college, take a look and try to randomly map what is happening actually in the teaching and learning situation, because you may surprise at what happened in the teaching and learning, although the outside world has been changing a lot. So that's one case. Based on that study, we were trying to change the role of the higher education in Indonesia, especially with the new setup from the government, where higher education is now being put together into one ministry with the research and technology. So it means that, okay, what happened in the classroom must be changing, and then we try to change it into a bigger picture, with the role of higher education now is not only teaching and research, but as an agent of economic development. So it means you have to go higher, you have to go wider, not only focusing on your classroom. And your classroom, of course, will change because of the change outside, expectedly. And the architecture based on the, you have the, okay.
Yeah, Bu.
The architecture already?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the architecture becomes like this. It used to be that higher education is expected to fill only, to graduate only skilled workers or, good graduates with a number of graduates. But now we measure the graduates with category being employed. Skilled workers mean you are already employed by some offices or by self. And then you also have another indicators, performance indicator, which is not only skilled workers, that is innovation. And that is the hardest part. That's why the research and technology is put together with higher education in Indonesia. And of course, the skilled workers and innovation is not only put there in the library as a report, but you have to go into the industry and proven that it is being quote-unquote bought by the industry. So that's one thing. Of course, by that we try to link and match our program in higher education, which is very difficult. We used to be looking only at the teaching and learning, and now we are looking also at the research what we call exploration, and we have the findings as a result of the research, which is usually published in international publication. But then, the findings is not innovation yet, because innovation has to go several more steps into being bought by the industry. And that is when the problem comes. We don't have the industry partner, and we don't know the public wants, the public needs, and we were captured by media from time to time with all the news, oh, it is bad, etc., etc. And we are working also with the government regulation, so that's the case. So I put there into what they called as pentahelix instead of triple helix. Triple helix is only academia, business, and government. But the pentahelix put the public and media come into the picture. So, challenge for universities and higher education institutions in Indonesia in trying to do the transformation. First, we are doing the new business model. We have to do the new business model. And how we are doing it, I don't know, to tell you the truth, because every one of the universities of the higher education institutions trying something differently. And we allow them to do that because otherwise we will be all in uniform and doesn't make sense anymore. Okay, so yes, we try to make it flexible for the university or higher education. They may involve in flexible learning, in MOOCs, in online, in retail business, in making multi-entry, multi-exit for their education, and they focus on soft skills, and they may try whatever they try to do. And then the other one is, the most difficult one is the teacherpreneur challenge. That is turning our lecturer into someone who is entrepreneur in terms of academics, not in terms of business, but in terms of academics. That's why I call it teacherpreneur. Okay, so they have to be able to serve as a leader, to influence the society around him. They have to know whatever, those professor with all the gadgets, just like the gadgets professor. And then they have to be connected in a network, not only one network, but a lot of networks. And then they have to be able to coach, to improve themselves, and to coach the students. So that's the case of teacherpreneur. The other one, the hardest part also is the teaching and learning process. Like I said, the 30 years ago and the now picture of teaching and learning process is actually, from my research, I found out just the same. However, the needs is already different and the development outside is already different. I quoted here from Stephen Wheeler's, there are 6 principles of learning now, which is totally different from what we used to know. And then what is the new definition of pedagogy, which is not teaching anymore, but leading people. So that's the case. With that, I think that is how I respond to Prof. Fauzy's TN50. It's hard, Prof. It's a lot of work, Prof. It's a lot of challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Paulina. Okay, if you can just quickly recap some of what Ibu Paulina was saying. Number 1 was about teaching and learning being the same 30 years ago and today. Now the funny thing is, why when outside the development is so rapid, why are we still more or less the same? Prof. Fauzy, you went to MIT, correct? Or was it Harvard? Both. You went to both for your sabbatical, not too long ago. And the thing is, MIT and Harvard are very well-known academic institutions. And we think that they would be the least resistant or the most resistant to change, right? Because they were established so many years ago, they should be the most resistant to change. But actually, you can report, I think tomorrow, that they are actually ahead. Right? Okay. And Prof. Paulina also mentioned about